Now, if you take just one thing from this training, remember this. The fastest way for you to learn to play music by ear is to do all of your ear training practice in one key. That means you listen to every song as though it's in the same key, and you transcribe every song in the same key. So why should you do all of your ear training practice in one key? Well, most musicians, when they try to figure out songs by ear, try to learn every song in the key of the original song. So they'll figure out a Coldplay song in B flat minor, followed by a U2 song in E major, and then a Pink Floyd song in D minor, Beatles song in F major, a Hans Zimmer soundtrack in C minor, and so on. And when you play all of these songs in the different keys that they're written in, it is very hard to spot any relation from one song to the next. It can seem like any of the 12 major chords could be used at any time, and that any of the 12 minor chords could be used at any time, and it's like you're trying to learn 12 different languages all at the same time. However, if you line up all of the songs that you transcribe in the same key, you notice very quickly that it's the same few notes and the same few chords that are being used over and over again. And the one thing changing from song to song is usually just the key signature. It's not the notes and not the chords. Now, I discovered this one key ear training method completely by accident. There was a 2-year period when I was about 16 to 18 where I just started playing everything in one key, which happened to be C minor. I already knew the notes of C minor scale, and every time I went to a new key, it just felt like I was going back to square one. So I decided to go all in on one key. Everything I composed was in one key. Every new music theory concept I learned about, I would transpose into my one key, and I'd learn it from that one key. And every song I listened to, I naturally listened to it as though it were in my one key. So within just a few months, I had dozens and even hundreds of songs that I transcribed all lined up in the same key. And this gave me a crystal clear picture of how music works. I knew all the common melodic shapes, there's only so many, and I knew all the common chord progressions, there's only so many, and there was no distraction in my mind that comes from changing keys. Now, restricting my playing to one key went against everything most music teachers had ever told me. Things like practice playing in all 12 keys, learn to play all 12 major scales, learn to play all 12 minor arpeggios, and so on. I even remember a band member saying to me, "You need to address that," which was his way of saying I needed to get better at playing in other keys. But while my scales and arpeggios didn't necessarily improve during that time, my ear training did, faster than ever. Within just a few months, I found that I could play most pop songs by ear flawlessly. I got to the point where I didn't even need to test my answers at the piano because I just knew what the notes were and I knew what the chords were. I'd played them 100 times. I reached the same level in ear training exams as the one student in our class who had perfect pitch. And to be clear, I don't have perfect pitch. This was all using relative pitch. And it became clear that my ear was improving faster than any of my music classmates and even surpassing most of my music teachers. Now, at the time, I didn't know why my ear was developing so fast. I thought I must just be practicing more than anyone else. But that wasn't actually the case. Most of my classmates were trying to play songs by ear just as much as I was. And these were the days before the internet, before you could really find sheet music online. So we were all figuring out songs by ear. However, the only thing that I did differently was transcribe every song within the same key. Have you ever questioned why we have 12 keys? Wouldn't one key be enough? Well, interestingly, we didn't always have 12 keys. The main practical reason that 12 keys were made possible and developed was so that a composer can choose a key that is the best fit for their music and for the instruments that are playing it. So every instrument has its own range and its own sweet spot, which is a range where it sounds its strongest. And often a composer will compose a song in one key, but when it comes time to arrange that song for the performers, they will transpose it into a completely different key. For example, if the highest note is too high for the singer, then they'll transpose everything down a whole step. Or if the lowest note is too low for the singer, they'll transpose everything up a whole step. And when a cover artist sings their own version of a popular song, usually they sing it in a different key, and it's for this very reason. And although the two versions of the song will sound slightly different in different keys, most listeners will never notice the change of key. So having 12 keys allows composers to find the best range for their music. However, 12 keys was not created to make music theory confusing and more complicated to music students, although that's exactly what it's done. And it's caused many musicians to never understand how music works just because they have this key confusion. They're constantly distracted and confused by all the different sharps and different flats, when the truth is that most music actually uses the same few notes and the same few chords, and the only thing changing is usually the key. Now, no key is better than another. The key of G-flat major is no better than the key of C major. G-flat major looks more complicated when seen on paper because it has 6 flats, but in reality you can get just as complicated within the key of C major. Now, there is a time and a place for mastering all 12 keys. I'm not saying that it's not important, it absolutely is, but I believe this should be practiced after you've mastered one key. Personally, it wasn't until later that I became fluent playing in all 12 keys, but it was only after a 2-year period that I had spent focused on one key. So I encourage you to focus on ear training, because as a musician, ear training is king, and to do all of your ear training in one key and to become a master of that one key. And once you've made progress in your ear training, it's then a much simpler task to become fluent playing in all 12 keys. Now, obviously, I didn't play absolutely everything in one key. I still had piano lessons going on. I still had orchestra practices. So I naturally played a normal amount of repertoire in other keys. But it was in my private practice where almost all of my playing and my composing and certainly my transcribing was always done in the same key. So I encourage you to try this for yourself. I call this fixed key learning. You restrict all or most of your playing to one key for the next few months. Now, this will work for any key. I know great musicians who love E minor. I know great musicians who love D minor. In fact, I think everyone secretly has a favorite key that they think best in already. However, for my online video training, I've chosen to use the key of C major, which is the same key as A minor. That's all the white notes on the piano. And these two scales are called relative major and minor scales. They are related because they use the same notes. And every key actually represents two scales. There's a major scale and a relative minor scale. So this would be a great key to use. If you watch my upcoming video lessons, all of my teaching is in C major and A minor. And in the next lesson, I'm going to show you the optimal way to practice transcribing a song by ear.